to Sweet Annie's book reading. Now, as I would have said the last time, I am going to be reading my book. Published yet, this book I've been writing for quite a number of years. But, I was always waiting for the right time, the right person to be able to edit it for me. But now we're going to be reading these. I always felt that I was not good enough and I couldn't write and all those things. But now that I have you, you will tell me if you're enjoying my story, because you will get the ups, you will get the downs, you will get every part of the story. So this is only the second day that or the second week that we started, because you're going to be seeing one of these videos every week. So I have my book right there in front of me, and today's tea, because last time I had juice, I'm having tea today, and the tea that we are having is basically for my throat. My throat always feels dry and husky and everything like that. So it is marshmallow root, some mullein, and some slippery elm, which are all good things for your throat. And the mullein is good for your lungs. But anyway, enough chit chat, because I'm sure that y'all are here not to hear me chat, but to hear me read. No, I decided to read it in my own voice because it's my story. And, just if you have any comments on it or anything like that, because eventually we'll probably start doing these live, but when I get more people, because this account is very small and I don't have the people yet. So yes, so this is where we're at right now. And subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more of the story, and like the video, because that's the only way this video will be able to get out to more people. So let's get started from the beginning. So we're going back a little bit of history, not a lot, because I don't know a lot. I only know basically what I was told. So let me just get my computer here now. And we're going to get started, because I don't want these videos to go on too long. So, and all right, let's get started. The roots beneath the cart road. In those days, the world where we live was shaped by dirt tracks rather than highways. Life demanded a relentless kind of survival. Chopping wood, tending to the outside fires, and working and cooking on coal pots. Walking the paths of the landscape that gave nothing for free. It was an existence built on calloused hands and endurance. Hear that? That kind of land itself, a history carved right into the dirt, born from the foresights of my great grandfather, who invested in a piece of earth that we call our own. He divided simply by the old lines, boys on one side and girls on the other side, separated by the width of the cart road. The boys' parcels was neat and square, My eldest uncle up in front, and my other uncle in the back. Easy plots for building houses and setting down firm foundations. The girls, on the other hand, side was a different story altogether. Chopped up unevenly with a piece nudged out for an outside child and shifting family claims. My grandmother land ended up shaping very uneven, and my aunt's plot took a shape of an L. Yet in those days, nobody complained. There was a fierce gratitude just of having a patch of earth of your own, rich with the shape of the heavy trees, wild fruit, and quite resilient peace that people who worked it, like wild fruits, and a quiet resilience of the people who worked it. The older generations moved through that world with innate wisdom, deeply in tune with both the land and the spiritual realm. In their own right, they were all herbalists, knowing every leaf, root, vine that could heal an ailment or soothe a heavy spirit. Back then, I didn't always understand the names of the plants or the reasons behind the remedies my grandmother spoke of. But looking back, I realize those lessons were seeds planted deep in the very soil, waiting for time to do its work. And carry on the legacy is simply how I found my way back home and who I am today. Long before my mother came to be, my grandmother had already known the bitter ache of the loss on the same family land when she was just a young woman carrying her very first child. The heavy demands of the household did not pause for pregnancy or even at 7 months along, with her elders still expected her to shoulder the hard labor of chopping wood. She felt a sudden shift in her body, a movement that signaled labor had come far too soon. In those days, there were no modern machines and inventions to hold onto a premature life. The little girl lived for 3 days. She had a name, and she was held in the heart before she slipped away. That loss changed something fundamentally in my grand. Years later, she found herself pregnant once again, deeply in love with the man who would become her husband, and determined to protect the life she was carrying. She drew a hard line with the heavy demands of expectations. A boundary she drew in the dirt became a shield for her. Years passed, and the quiet turning of the time brought another chapter. At 20 years old, a defining age that seemed to echo through the women in our family, that loss changed something fundamental in her. Years later, when she found herself pregnant once again, deeply in love with the man who would become her husband. And she determined to protect the life she was carrying. She drew the line when the heavy demands of expectation were pushed onto her again. She looked her mother in the eyes and said, "No." Her mother was furious, unyielding in ways of the old world. But my grandmother did not back down. She refused to take that chance again. So at 20 years old, this is when my grand was carrying again. But this time, it was my mom who would take her first breath against the backdrop of the same hard land, setting the stage for generations to follow. Looking back now, with the perspective that time and distance grant, those trees must have stood watch over the property for generations because they were massive, ancient feeling giant that frame our daily lives. Right next to our home stood a tamarind tree, its broad canopy casting deep, welcoming shade with the children who would gather and pitch marbles and lose hours to play. Further out, sprawling across the yard and spilling towards my aunt's plot, an enormous apple tree yielding the sweetest golden apples. I can still picture my grandmother harvesting them and crafting a batch after batch of her golden apple juice and her golden apple wine and anything else you could do with golden apple. Sometimes she would boil them in sugar, make a syrup. It was, that those were the days. In our house, the refrigerator was never stocked with store-bought cartons. Whenever you opened the door, there was always a natural juice waiting, freshly pressed from whatever the land happened to bear at the time. The variety was endless. We had two kinds of plum trees, including a hog plum tree alongside of a generous mango tree, clusters of bananas, a pawpaw tree, a soursop tree, a large cherry tree, towered over the yard, though I had to admire it from afar because I was seriously allergic to those cherries, those Bajan cherries, because the vitamin C content in those cherries was way more than a orange could ever dream of holding. We had lime trees, and scattered close to the ground were the healing staples of the home. She had aloe vera, she had broadleaf thyme, she had, and I understand that it is not called broadleaf thyme here. It is called oregano, but we knew it as broadleaf thyme. And I remember when you hear my voice goes. I remember when she was cooking, she would say, Anne, go outside and get a piece of broadleaf thyme for me. And I guess that's the only name that they knew it by. But that always stood in our yard. Well, not yard, it was more of the flower garden in the front, actually, because we had, different kinds of trees, roses, and different kinds of stuff. Um, it was it was a living, breathing ecosystem. Years later, running into a childhood friend, he smiled and told me, with those grounds back there, what it meant to him. He said to the kids from outside, visiting the land wasn't just coming over. It was like stepping into a secret forest, an adventure waiting to unfold. And thinking back of it, beneath the shades of those great trees and a sweet bounty of earth, the my childhood truly wasn't bad at all. It was magical. Yet, long before I came to walk those paths, the land held deeper stories. Before my mother ever drew breath in this world, there were the things my grandmother said. She knew the weight of the soil and the hard turn of life lived without looking back. Her voice stayed rooted right there beneath the old cart road, echoing through it. And then the next section we're going to look at, it says, across the water and the islands. My story begins on the soil of two different Caribbean islands, woven together with love, longing, and the choices of those that came before me. My maternal grandfather was a native of St. Lucia, another Caribbean island in the West Indies, who was living in Barbados with my grandmother at the time. I'm not sure how they met. My grandmother never told me. Barbados was a different world entirely in those days. And it was a place where I would eventually be born. But when my mother was only 8 years old, life got hard. Finding a job became a struggle for my grandfather, and he made a heavy decision to return to St. Lucia. After he left, my grandmother never saw him again. She chose to stay behind because Barbados was her home, and she wanted to raise her daughter in her hometown. She simply didn't see it as necessary to follow him. Naturally, this sudden departure was a very traumatic experience for my grandmother, as well as my mother. Losing her father was a difficult thing for a child. From that day on, my grandmother struggled entirely on her own to raise my mother. What made it worse was that he never sent any kind of support. A few years later, a telegram arrived saying that he had passed away in St. Lucia, and the family there wanted her to come down and bury him. but she didn't believe that it was her responsibility anymore because he had walked away from his responsibility, and she felt she owed him nothing because that was a choice. And I believe she never truly found closure. Raising my mother alone was a huge challenge. My grandfather's shadow stayed in that house. As you would imagine, I never actually met him, yet I felt as though I knew him all my life because my grandmother spoke of him so often, right up until the day she died. Her words told everything I needed to know: how much she loved him and how deeply he had hurt her. Sometimes she would speak of him in the present tense as though he were still alive and had never left at all. No, I think that what I would do, I would talk about her a little because I want to end with the poem that Letitia had wrote for her. So I'm going to talk about her for a little bit. And as I said, I'll insert a picture or something. My grandmother was the matriarch of our family. Her name was Ruby. She first walked in the market as a vendor. She then became a butler for the Bush Hall Great House. This was a plantation house. She worked there for years. Now, the house is a church known as Abundant Life Assembly, a church I would later be a member of. After leaving there, she started to work at the Harbor Police, which is known as like the Coast Guard, in the Bay Street as a maid. The building that housed the police station was condemned, but she worked there until she retired at 65. While she worked there, swimming lessons were taught. Swimming lessons were taught, so she made sure that my sister and I had lessons every Saturday morning. Because of her, I can swim today. Although she was so stern with us, I can remember her teaching me little prayers before we went to bed. With one was over 50 years old, and she would tell us to say, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord." I don't say that word now, but I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. How much of you know that prayer? Tell me in the comments. Because I remember a little girl, you had to kneel down by the bed and she would make you say your Lord's Prayer and she would make you say this little prayer. How much of you know that prayer? Then another one for mornings. Now I wake to see the light. I thank the Lord for bringing me through the night. Lord, protect me during the day. And I can't remember the rest. Although sometimes we don't realize if these simple things is what added character to our lives. So, in loving memory, because this story is my story, so I'm not diving too much into like them because it is more my story. So this is in loving memory of Ruby Gregg, 1921. I was trying to remember the other day, when was she born? So which means she would have seen a lot. She would have known a lot. Born in 1921, the things that probably was going on. So 1921 to 2007. And now this is the poem that I was telling you about. And we are going to end with that. But before I say the poem, if you're enjoying this book reading, just let me know that you're enjoying it, because we have so much interest in this. Is just like the back story a bit, but we have so much interesting things in this to talk about. So much interesting stories in this whole thing. You have the ups, the downs, you cry, you laugh. It is just a roller coaster of a book. So stick with me. Stick with me, because you're going to thoroughly love this book and love this book reading. And tell it to any of your friends that might be interested in hearing a story, my story. So this poem that my eldest daughter wrote, because she's a poet and a writer, and is called Ruby. So I thought it only natural to have it in her little chapter. We welcome you with open arms. And this poem was written for her to be read at her funeral. So, because this was written for her after she passed on. We welcome you with open arms into heaven's gates. For this precious jewel, heaven's angels await to join us at God's dinner table to feast, a hearty feast. Rest, my child, for all is well. Your soul shall be at peace. On the earth, you did your heavenly duties. Yes, you played your part. You cared for others more than yourself. You love with all your heart. Come, my child, take my hand. Walk with me to the promised land. Your throne is set at your Father's table. In God's kingdom, you now reset. Forever and ever, eternally, your memory always to be cherished by your friends and family. Oh, your memory, forever and ever eternally, your memory always be cherished by your friends and family. The lives you touch with God's sweet kiss in their hearts, you would daily be missed. To God's precious jewel by Letitia J. Graves Barker. And I think that that is so beautiful. So the next time we come back here, we are going to be reading now about my mom. A little, little backstory about my mom and all of that. So cut off here. And I want to say a thank you to all of you that have been joining me for these 2 sessions so far. And I hope that you're enjoying it so far. And I hope that you will come back and join us again. Because this, as I said, is going to be an exciting series, reading reading my book and me getting it out there so that it could help whoever that it needs to help. So until I see y'all again, and don't forget, this channel is Sweet Honey's Wisdom, but I also have Sweet Honey's Kitchen, where I do everything kitchen, and then I have Sweet Honey's Life, which I would do anything else. If I go visit a place, I put it up there. My herbalism stuff, I put up there. When I first started, I used to put everything on one channel, but I realized that that wasn't working for me, so I split things out. Previously, this channel was Sweet Honey's Faith, but because I'm no longer into religion, because I'm no longer into religion, I have decided to just switch the name to Sweet Honey's Wisdom, because another thing, you would hear me using other names and not the names that you're accustomed to hearing. So if you could bond with me and you could gel with me, come and take this ride with me. And remember, everywhere you go, continue to let your light shine and spread your love. And thank you for watching. Bye.